What I'm working on today is a starter out of a 2001 Honda Accord. But it's a typical Nippon Denso starter, so it's used in a lot of Hondas, a lot of Toyotas, and some other vehicles as well. What I'm doing is I'm refreshing the solenoid / relay. I had it apart before to clean the contacts, but I found out the contacts were not just dirty, but deeply worn. So it did work for a while, but it started its thing again. And the symptoms of this failing are as you turn the key and it just goes click real loud, and you just have to keep doing that click, click, click until it finally engages. And it slowly gets worse. Like originally it was only doing it 1 or 2 clicks and then it'd be fine for the rest of the day, and then it's been getting to where it's like 6 to 8 clicks. But you want to check your more obvious things first, like battery connections, the wire connections, both here and on the other end of the cable. But if you get to this point, they sell kits on eBay that contain all the parts for servicing them. So, new plunger, new contacts, bushings, and they can range from between like $8 to I think $15. I think I bought the $15 kit here because what it is, it comes with 2 sets of contacts because they're different. So depending on which starter you got, you'll use the other contacts. You could obviously take your starter apart first before you order them and get the cheaper one if you desire. So this just takes care of the part where it engages and spins. If you're having problems with it spinning slowly, then that's going to be bad battery, bad connection, or in the starter itself. We're not going into that. We're just doing, which this is basically the solenoid, but it's also a relay on top of it instead of having a separate relay and then the solenoid like some vehicles do. They combined both into one. So battery lead goes to this terminal, starter lead goes to that. That's all there is to it. It's pretty simple. Then this lead here goes into the windings itself, and there's this rubber cover that goes on that. So we're going to go ahead and take that nut off. And it uses Torx bits, and they are a T20. There's a total of 3. My third one was stripped out. It was actually missing when I first took it apart, so I threaded in a bolt. But yeah, T20 will be the factory screw. This cover's under a little bit of spring tension, but not much. So this is the old plunger. This is part of the contact area. You can make out that it's fairly pitted, but the other part's worse. I'll show you in a second. When you get the cheaper kit, you probably won't get the plunger, and that's fine because, like I said, this is just a little pitted. You could clean that up and then mate it with one of these new ones, and I'm sure it would work fine. Just this kit also came with a new plunger. And you have to reuse the old spring. But inside here is where the contacts are at. and each one is held in by the nut that's under the nut that holds the wire on. So we look at our old connector, contact I should say, and we match it up to the new one. Okay, so then the bolt will go through that. Okay, so there's two lengths of bolts in here, and so it looks like the shorter one is the one that goes on this side here. So it's going to go through the contact. I'm going to put the spacer up here between the cable and the housing. We're going to put the bolt with the contact on it right in there like that. Then we put this other insulator on top. It's got a recess in it, so you put the washer inside there. Then you get the thin nut, because there's two types in here. There's the thin nut and a flange nut. The flange nut's for the other side. So this thin nut will go right here. And you want to snug it down, but not too tight because, you know, it's plastic and it'd be easy to crack that. But obviously you don't want it loose. And I'm sure there's a torque spec for it. There's a torque spec for everything. I don't know what it is. I'm just going to make it snug. Then I put the cable on. Now for this side, they don't give you a new nut. They do for the cable side, but not the winding side. So we're going to take the old nut and washer, put that on. And same thing, just make it snug. Pull the other side off. It's assembled the same way. It's got the skinny nut, the insulator, and the flat washer. And again, they gave us new insulators, but not new flat washers, so we'll be reusing those. And we'll take that out. There's no wire on this side, so this one's easier. So it's just the nut, the contact, and the insulator, and it'll all come apart. But you can see by this contact, hopefully the camera will pick that up, it's not just pitted, it's got a deep groove in it, so when you're turning the key on, the plunger is hitting that. That's how it makes a through connection, because there's a connector on both sides. So the power from the cable goes through this round contact to this contact, and then it goes into the starter. But it's clicking on there, but since it's so thin, it's not getting the force that it should have, and so it's not getting a good connection. So really, with the condition of everything in here, this one contact's all I really needed. But at least the kit was inexpensive. So I got to match it up, but you can see, again, the contacts are different. So that's going to be the one I use. Even it's a little different, but just a slightly different design, but still going to have the same contact surface it needs. So we use this. We use the new nut. That's quite a bit. No, wait, that's the wrong one. And the new insulator. Put it in there. Make sure that's flat back there. Now we want the other insulator with the washer, the other thin nut. Got the old spring transferred to the new plunger. So you just want to make sure your bottom connectors are parallel with the base here, so you get as much of a flat surface connection on this as possible. So you can see what happens. You energize this, and the windings in here pull this piston down. The piston contacts these two contacts, so the power from the battery cable comes through here, goes through here, in here, and into the windings down here to turn the starter over. Simple but ingenious design. Peeling the old gasket off because it came with a new one. I may not use the new one because it doesn't seem to fit this. Okay, I'm not going to use this new gasket because it's not cut to fit this. It's actually a little longer. And it's got that strange curvature at the bottom. So I'll reuse the old one. Not a big deal. It's not like it holds any fluid in. That's just to keep moisture out. So we'll reuse that. Just hold it in place while we put the screws back in and tighten them up. Okay, so it came with a new nut for the battery lead. Put what's left of that cover back on over here. I think I'm going to wire tie that. It's kind of melted. Okay, so it's ready to go back in the car and we'll get it tested out. So this is my pile of old parts, and you'll see we got a few leftover parts, so different contacts for that other side. And a couple of O-rings. I didn't run into that, so either it's for another application or they weren't in mine. This was a rebuilt starter at one point. There was a label on it still when I pulled it off, so it has been into. Alright, I'll get that in the car and we'll test it out. Alright, the moment of truth. That's all there is to it. So, pretty simple job if you need to repair one of those solenoids on that Nippon Denso starter, and save you a few bucks too. I didn't show any of the removal or installation of the starter. It's pretty straightforward, particularly on this car. Is the 4-cylinder model, so starter's real easy to get to. I'll show a little brief detail under the hood, but other than that, we'll call it good. Okay, always start by disconnecting your battery connections whenever you're working on the electrical system. Starter has a 14mm bolt on top. I believe it was a 17mm on the bottom. Under here is the battery cable. Then there's one wire connection here that unplugs. It does help to remove this bracket with a 10mm bolt. It just gets it out of your way. And that's all there is to it. Pretty straightforward. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Happy New Year.